The numbers used to sing to me, not in a crazy way, but in a quiet, beautiful harmony. I'd open my portfolio app, and the green, upward trending lines were a symphony of my own genius. They were the sound of my family's future being written, a future of effortless security and boundless freedom. I was the composer of that symphony, a master conductor of the stock market, and I believed with the unshakable faith of a true believer that the music would never stop. Now the only number I look at is the price of a gallon of milk, and the only sound I hear is the quiet, steady rhythm of my own breathing in a room that is far too small for the ghosts of the life I used to have. Before the crash, my life was a masterpiece of careful planning and aggressive ambition. I was a successful sales director for a medical supply company, a job I was good at, a job that paid the bills and then some. But my real job, my true passion, began after my wife and 2 kids were asleep. That's when I would descend into the glowing world of my trading screens. I was a student of the market, a devout disciple of financial freedom. I didn't see stocks as gambles. I saw them as pieces of a grand, intricate puzzle, and I was convinced I was one of the few who could see the whole picture. My wife trusted me completely. She saw the results: the beautiful, sprawling house in the perfect neighborhood, the 2 new cars in the driveway, the exotic vacations we took every year. I was the architect of our prosperity. Our savings account was just a holding pen. The real work was being done in my brokerage account, where our money was working for us, generating a beautiful, ever-growing stream of passive income. I talked about the number, the amount of money that would mean we were free, the point where our investments would generate enough income to replace my salary entirely. That was the holy grail. It was the finish line of a race I had been running my whole life, a race to escape the quiet, working-class anxiety I had grown up with. My strategy was aggressive. While my friends were talking about the safety of index funds and diversification, I was chasing growth. Tech stocks, biotech startups, companies that were either going to change the world or flame out in a blaze of glory. And for years, I was a prophet. My portfolio grew at a staggering rate. The 2008 crisis was a distant memory, a history lesson for lesser investors. We were in a new era, a permanent bull market, and I was its golden child. I felt invincible, a master of a universe that I could control with a few clicks of a mouse. My confidence in hindsight was a form of madness. The decision that brought it all down was born of that madness. It was a single company, a biotech firm that was on the verge of getting FDA approval for a revolutionary new drug. The potential was astronomical. It wasn't just a stock. It was a lottery ticket to the next level, a ticket to the number in a single glorious leap. All my principles of risk management, the ones I preached but had secretly started to abandon, went out the window. This was a sure thing, a once-in-a-generation opportunity. I started to funnel more and more of our capital into this one stock. I sold off our boring, reliable blue-chip shares. I took out a home equity line of credit, a move I justified to my wife as a strategic leveraging of our assets. I was no longer an investor. I was a gambler who had convinced himself he was reading the dealer's mind. I went all in. The entire symphony of our financial life, every note of our security, was now riding on the outcome of a single clinical trial. I remember the night before the news was due to be released. I couldn't sleep. I walked through our beautiful, quiet house, a king surveying his kingdom on the eve of a great victory. I looked in on my sleeping children, and I felt a surge of love and pride so intense it almost brought me to tears. I was doing this for them, for her, for us. I was the hero who was about to deliver them the world. I stood by the massive picture window in our living room, looking out at the shimmering lights of the city, and I felt a profound, unshakable certainty. I had seen the future, and the future was glorious. The future arrived the next morning, not as a glorious sunrise, but as a brutal, instantaneous blackout. I woke up before dawn, my body humming with a nervous, electric energy. I made a coffee and went to my office, my temple, to await the news. The press release was scheduled for 8 a.m. before the market opened. At 8:01, the headline flashed across my screen. It was not the headline I had spent months dreaming of. FDA rejects drug over unexpected and severe side effects. The words didn't register at first. My brain simply refused to process them. It had to be a mistake, a typo, a bad dream. I read the article, my eyes scanning the text, my mind a maelstrom of denial. The drug hadn't just failed, it was a catastrophic failure. The company's entire future, its very reason for existing, was gone. I opened my brokerage account. The pre-market trading had begun. My stock, the one that held our entire net worth, had opened down 95%. I stared at the number, the one that used to be a beautiful seven-figure symphony. It was now a discordant, ugly, and pathetic sum, less than the value of the 2 cars in our driveway. The work of a decade vaporized in a single second before the sun had even fully risen. I didn't move. I just sat there in my leather chair in my beautiful office, and I watched the screen as if staring at it long enough could somehow reverse the flow of time. The market opened and the bloodbath was complete. The stock was halted, then it reopened, and the last few percentage points of its value bled away. It was over. The music had stopped. A new sound began to fill the void, the sound of a margin call. The home equity line of credit, the money I had borrowed against our house to make my sure-thing bet, was now a toxic, unsecured debt. The bank's automated systems had already sent the email. My portfolio, which was the collateral for that loan, was now worthless. They wanted their money. Now, the hours that followed are a blur of frantic, panicked phone calls. I called my broker, my voice a high-pitched, unrecognizable squeak. There was nothing he could do. I called the bank begging for an extension for a payment plan. I was met with the cold, polite, and implacable logic of a contract. I was in default. The consequences would be swift. My wife came into the office, a cheerful good morning on her lips. She saw my face, she saw the screen, and the cheerfulness died instantly. "What happened?" she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. I tried to speak, to explain, but no words came out. I just pointed at the screen, at the smoldering wreckage of our life. The argument that followed was the first of 100, a long, agonizing war in which there would be no winners. She didn't understand the details, the margin calls, the biotech specifics. But she understood the simple, brutal truth. I had taken our fortress, our beautiful, safe fortress, and I had gambled it away on a single, monumentally stupid bet. The trust she had placed in me, the faith she had in my genius, died in that office. And in its place grew a new, terrifying emotion, a profound, all-consuming fear. Our life, the one I had promised her would be free of worry, was now a prison of it. The symphony was over. The nightmare had just begun. The nightmare phase is a slow, grinding demolition of everything you thought was real. The first casualty was our life of effortless abundance. The credit cards were declined. The automatic payments for the kids' private school and music lessons were rejected. The beautiful machine of passive income I had built was not just broken. It was actively working in reverse, a monstrous engine of debt that was consuming our lives. My wife, a woman who had never had to worry about money, was suddenly thrust into a world of financial triage. She was on the phone for hours every day, negotiating with creditors, trying to hold back a tidal wave of consequences with a flimsy wall of desperate promises. I was useless, a ghost in my own home, paralyzed by a mixture of shame and a profound, immobilizing depression. I had been the captain, the master, and commander. Now I was just a shell-shocked survivor, adrift in the wreckage I had created. The house was the next to go. With no income to pay the mortgage and a massive, unsecured debt from the home equity loan, the bank moved quickly. The foreclosure notice felt less like a legal document and more like a declaration of war. We were being evicted from our own dream. Packing up that house was the most painful experience of my life. Every object was a memory, a testament to a life that was now over. We were not just packing boxes, we were packing up our identity. We moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment. The move was a physical manifestation of our fall, a daily, humiliating reminder of what I had lost. The beautiful, open spaces of our old home were replaced by cramped rooms and thin walls. The silence in that apartment was a weapon. My wife and I stopped talking. We were two strangers, bound together by a shared catastrophe, but separated by a chasm of my betrayal. She would look at me and I could see the accusation in her eyes, the silent, screaming question, "How could you have done this to us?" My relationship with my children fractured. They were too young to understand the specifics, but they understood the general, terrifying truth. Their world had been turned upside down. Their home was gone, their parents were always fighting or not speaking at all, and their father, the man who was supposed to be their rock, was a sad, broken man who barely left his room. I tried to find work, but my confidence was shattered. My identity as a financial genius was a cruel joke. I was a man who had spectacularly, publicly, failed at the one thing he was supposed to be good at. The failure was a brand, and I was wearing it like a scarlet letter. The final, inevitable break came on a Sunday. There was no fight. There was no grand, dramatic scene. We were just sitting in the bleak, anonymous living room of our apartment, the silence stretching between us like a desert. "I can't live like this anymore," she said, her voice quiet, devoid of emotion. "I can't live in this state of constant anxiety. The kids deserve a chance to be happy, to be kids, to feel safe. And they will never feel safe as long as we are living inside your mistake." She told me she was taking the children to live with her parents in another state. It was a place of stability, a place where the fallout from my financial bomb could not reach them. I didn't protest. I didn't argue. What could I say? She was right. I was a contagion, and she was putting her children into quarantine. I watched her pack. I watched her explain to the children that they were going on a long vacation. I watched my son, my brave little man, try not to cry. I stood on the sidewalk and watched her drive away. I was no longer a husband. I was no longer a full-time father. I was no longer a successful investor. The symphony was over. The conductor's podium was empty. All that was left was a single broken man in a small, empty apartment with nothing but the echo of the beautiful music he had destroyed. The silence that followed their departure was absolute. It was the silence of a void. For weeks, I barely moved. I lived on cheap takeout and the dregs of my self-pity. The apartment was a prison, the four walls a constant reminder of my solitary confinement. The only thing that forced me out of my stupor was the final, brutal logic of survival. I had to find a job or I would be on the street. It was a humbling journey. My resume, once a proud testament to my success, was now a document of my failure. I ended up taking a job at a call center for a home security company. It was a soul-crushing, ironic twist of fate. I, the man who had failed to secure his own family, was now spending my days reading a script about the importance of protecting your home. The work was monotonous and demeaning, but it was a paycheck. It was a routine. It was a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I moved into an even smaller, cheaper apartment, a single room with a kitchenette. My life was stripped down to its bare essentials: work, eat, sleep. I was a monk in a monastery of regret. It was in this Spartan existence that I began the slow, painful process of rebuilding, not my finances, but myself. With the constant, frantic noise of the market gone from my life, I began to hear my own thoughts for the first time in years. And I realized my obsession with the stock market hadn't just been about money. It had been about control. It was a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic world, to build a fortress so high that the inherent randomness of life could never touch me or my family. I had worshipped at the altar of certainty, and I had been a fool. Life is not a puzzle to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. There are no sure things. The only true asset you have is your own resilience, your own ability to get back up when life knocks you down. My phone calls with my children were the anchor of my new life. I learned to be a father from a distance. I couldn't buy them things, so I gave them my full attention. I listened to their stories. I helped them with their homework over video calls. I became a student of their lives. Our relationship, which had been strained by my distracted ambition, was slowly being rebuilt on a new, more honest foundation. I started to take long walks. I explored the city on foot, with no destination in mind. I discovered parks and neighborhoods I had never known existed. I had lived in the city for 15 years, but I had only ever seen it through the tinted windows of a luxury car, a landscape for my success. Now I was seeing it at ground level as a participant, not an observer. I found a quiet beauty in the ordinary, in the things that cost nothing. One day I was sitting on a park bench watching my son, now my ex-wife and kids had moved back to a nearby town after a few years, play in a little league game. He wasn't the star player. He was just a kid trying his best, laughing with his friends. The sun was warm on my face. The sound of the game, the cheers of the parents, the crack of the bat, it was a simple, beautiful, and completely real symphony. I'm not a rich man. I will be paying for my mistakes for a long time. I live in a small room. I work a job that will never make me a millionaire. But as I sat on that bench, I felt a sense of peace, a feeling of contentment that my millions had never given me. I had lost my dream life, a life built on the shifting sands of the stock market. But in the wreckage, I found a real one, a life that is small and sometimes difficult, but a life that is honest, a life that is present. I learned that the most valuable portfolio isn't the one in your brokerage account. It's the collection of small, beautiful, ordinary moments that make up a life. The music I hear now is quieter, but it is, for the first time, truly my own. Thanks for sticking around. What's your take on this story? Comment your thoughts and your country below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more episodes.